Hey traders, this is Christian Fromertz of Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your recap for Thursday, January 24th. So, really interesting day going on today in the market. A lot of movers, but I always start with the indices, and I've been kind of hammering this point home the last couple weeks. You look at the S&P and it's finished down 10 basis points, and if you're just trading the indices, you're probably like, oh wow, nothing really happened today. It was kind of a boring day, doji almost, candle for the day. But if you look what happened with between sectors and single names, a whole lot of movement going on. A lot, well, not a lot, but a couple sectors really crushed it today. I'm going to spend some time on the semiconductors. Intel reported after the hours, they missed and they're down a decent amount. So I'll go over that whole thing, but let me just finish with the indices just to kind of give it a quick look-see. The Qs are, just kind of hanging out. What I talked about in yesterday's video was that some areas, the indices are kind of stuck in the middle right now. There has been no major sell signal, although some people continue to kind of blast out charts of, very short term, saying that this is as far as we're going to go and we're going to go back down. I don't agree with that. I don't agree that we're going to go right up yet either. I think you just kind of have to wait and be patient. But I think just a ton of over analyzing. What did I call it yesterday? People sharpening their pencils, trying to figure out what the next move is going to be. I think that's kind of a little bit, I don't want to say a waste of time, but I think you just kind of have to wait and wait for that signal and kind of go from there. Small caps outperformed today. They were up 60 basis points. Remember, the small caps kind of led us up here. So, maybe they're going to lead us out of this congestion. No signal yet. It's still in value. It's still above the downtrend line, but we're still in value for the month. So I would like to see this pop out here. But we'll go back to this S&P Doji. And then really where things kind of got excited was with last night's earnings. Really lifted the whole semiconductor space. So, again, you're not going to see this if you look at the S&P chart, but the semiconductors, a huge move, right? Up over, 5.8%. So just a colossal move on nice volume from the semiconductor ETF. And names like, the names that reported last night, Lam Research closed right around the highs of the day. The Xilinx, I mean, look at the move in Xilinx. My goodness, what a move. 52-week high, total breakout, up 18%. Are you kidding me? So just a big move. And then this took names like Nvidia with it. Nvidia's right at the top of value, so right there. I don't have anything on in that one. AMD got a nice move. So just to kind of go through this whole group. Applied Materials, I mean, look at this chart. How great does that look? I am long MRVL, which had a similar move today. I've been long this name since, I think, January 8th. Around there. Did not close on the highs, but still a nice move. Another name that I'm watching is NXPI, which also, I mean, how pretty is that move above the 50-day moving average? And if you look at some of these charts, right, you kind of had a false move here, but what looks different? A nice green bar above the 50-day moving average, right? We got close here, tried to do it a little bit here, got kind of coiled here. This was a tough move, false move higher. And then just red bars and took out this version point of control and has been up ever since. So I think there's some really interesting things here. And, why I don't necessarily like the ETF, the SMH ETF, is because this guy is the biggest weight. And Intel is really, I think, is troubled, right? So they came out with earnings after the close today. But, they had this big security breach. And I believe that they lost a lot of business in that. So that's going to dominate that SMH ETF. So I think in this case it's better to pick single stocks. But the numbers, their guidance was really weak. 71.5 versus 73 estimates. So they really dropped that sucker. So if you kind of missed out on some of these semi names, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me why like Nvidia and some of these other names are moving down in sympathy, because I think it's company specific reasons. I mean, look at this thing. Nvidia is all the way down to 153 in the aftermarket. So If you missed out on some of these names, you might get the opportunity tomorrow, and I think that'll come out more in the conference call. But again, you got an opportunity. What else moved today? The solar names have been on fire as well. First Solar. This was a name I was looking at. I actually put this chart in our in the trading room probably about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and kind of gave. You see this in a lot of places, right? Things kind of went a little bit, and then they kind of came back into support and went. The name that we saw the call activity yesterday was SEDG. Pretty clean move there after yesterday. It was up 5.8%. So solar was hot, and then the airlines. And we were talking about this a little bit after the close today. What was really, I think, made it tricky was Delta was the first one of the airlines to come out, and they had bad, atrocious earnings. And then since then, all the other airlines have kind of come out, even though UAL popped and kind of gave it back, which is kind of weird. But LUV finished up 6%. So good numbers. Let's see what JetBlue did. I didn't get a chance to really look at this one. I think this whole group is tricky in general, but JetBlue, and then the third one was what? AAL, American Airlines, gave back some of the gains, but still up 6%. So really strong in a head fake. And then the same thing happened in the rails, sticking with transport. CSX was the first one to come out, and they missed on their earnings. And then UNP comes out and has a great quarter. And then NSC reported after the close, and I believe they also had some decent numbers that happened as well. Last I checked, they were up. Let's see. They've actually come back in, but they did hit a high of 171 there in the aftermarkets. So, some of the names that I've been trading. This is going to happen, right? So let me talk about the loser first. QLYS, which is a name that's been on my radar. I decided to take this thing off today. It's not doing what I wanted it to do. So I say this all the time, but you could get right back into it. But this was a false move in the beginning of yesterday. I think the enterprise software group, application group, was just not in focus today, which is fine. Let these things kind of come in a little bit. I would love if Salesforce comes in a little bit. This group has been really hot. But if they come in a little bit, I think it'll be another buying opportunity. So I'm excited. If these things come in a day, 1 or 2 days, come back into some support, maybe around, if it checks back into this 20-day moving average, Salesforce, I would be a buyer there. A few other names, Workday, still holding above the 5-day moving average, kind of an ugly looking name. So, you keep an eye on this group. There's a couple other names that I was going to go over here, but I'll stop there. And then what was also interesting today is the FANG stocks. They report, I think it's the 3rd or the 4th that Google reports. Amazon reports next week on the 31st. You'll find I was watching this name because I do have a position on that expires tomorrow. We'll see what it does. But it finally, even though it's kind of settled back in here after hours, but it was stuck in value all day long. Here it failed, here. Again, the value error is giving you great sense of not to play something until it breaks out. But if you go back to the 1-hour chart, or if you look at the 1-hour chart, it's just inside value for the week. So I'm surprised. Remember what we saw like the week or 2 weeks leading up for Netflix? Every analyst was upping their price target, and it made this huge run into earnings. I'm surprised the brokers have been pretty quiet about raising price targets for Amazon and Google. Maybe we see that tomorrow, maybe we see that, or maybe something's not right, and maybe they're not. There's a reason why they're not upping their price targets. Usually, the reason why I look for that is because some of these names are really great to play, not necessarily for earnings, but for a run into earnings. So we'll have to, keep an eye on that one. I have a feeling that this thing pops. I don't know what day it's going to happen, but I have a feeling it pops one day going into earnings. Which again I think is 131. Is it January 31? A few other names that we've been playing. So I mentioned the QLYS. There's 2 trades that I put on yesterday. That was one. The other one was was FN, Frank Nancy Fabrinet. This thing got going today, so was able to take a target in this. It was up 7%. Really nice move. It kind of gave a little bit of a shake and bake move yesterday, and then bounced nicely. So I was able to take a target up at $56 today. So nice winner, and that more than made up for the QLYS small loser. And somehow that's just sometimes it's just how it works out. Another one that I've been holding on to for about a week. This was a nice setup that we sent out. I think Square, we put this on. I don't have the date. I think it was the beginning of last week, and I think it was right on this bar. And I managed to take targets. I put more back on, and look at this thing go up 7% today. PayPal. So that's a really nice trade that we put on. PayPal. Also, a real nice move, almost a 52-week high, very close to one. This one's going to be reporting earnings. So some of these names, PayPal reports next week, are doing that, are running into earnings, and some really nice momentum. A couple other names, LVS, I would say out of the option activity today, this name reported earnings. Pretty dramatic, after post earnings trades that went up today. So this is one. This is on the top of the list because it was the most contracts. But look at what they did here. June 60-70 calls. Right. This is all opening. They bought the June 60-70 call spread for what, about $2.30, somewhere in there. I think that's a nice risk to reward going out to June. Now you're going to have to sit through another earnings cycle. But they also sold puts with this trade. So someone really likes this. And maybe see some value. Note we get the Macau numbers that come out on the 1st of the month, so just about a week away. But look at this too. Going out to January 2020, they came in once 956, then they came in again at 1135. I mean, this is some big notional. Look at this: $4.6 million, $3.2 million. So this, to me, if you're a fan of option activity, something seems like somebody really likes this name. This is also a little bit more January, same strike. Also, they did some September 57.5 calls. So if that's your thing, if option activity is your thing and you like to follow option activity, I personally, I have a position on in LVS. It's a small short-term position on that I put on for earnings. I added to it a little bit today, but I will probably structure something a little bit further out. But I think you could use the 50-day moving average as your stop to go long. And again, if you don't want to mess with the options, you could just buy the $56 stock and see where this thing wants to get to. But somebody really likes it apparently. A lot of option activity today post earnings in LVS. A few other names. One name that has continued to come up. There's a very small order in this one, but HIIQ. Making a nice move here. It is above value. It's to use that phrase, stuck in the middle. It's kind of stuck in the middle between the 50-day moving average and the 200. But I think this is a pretty interesting name. If you read the description, I think I just typed that in wrong. Let's try that again. So it is a they provide software and insurance solutions. Company specializes, so it's another cloud name. Cloud-based technology platform distributes innovative health insurance products as well as assists in development of insurance products through its relationships. So I think that's a pretty interesting name, and they've been coming into that name a couple times. Not huge orders, but pretty far, out of the money stuff. But still, if as long as you're disciplined, use maybe that 50-day moving average as your stop. I think it looks interesting. Another name that saw just a little bit of like the momentum, as I like to refer to it, the momentum call buying. Somebody sees something moving and they buy call. By the way, that's half of what we see. In terms of option activity, it's not because someone knows something. It's because they're playing momentum, right? Something is moving, and they want to get on not the bandwagon, but they want to get on the train, basically, and say, hey, something's got momentum to it. I'm going to buy calls. So that's a lot of what we see, and I think that's what we have going on here. Notice it's a very small trade. It's $60,000 in premium, but it kind of alerts me to the fact this just like I was talking about with a couple of the semi names, first time that we're over the 50-day moving average with a green bar, right? And since it broke below the 200, up at 26 bucks, failed here, failed here, failed here, failed here, failed here again. Notice that the price has been kind of catching up and made a lower high here, so it's a little bit different looking here. I bought some of this today. I bought a couple hundred shares, not a big position, but I think interesting. Another name that, again, a lot of names that I'm finding that I'm interested in. And again, you kind of have to be careful with not to take every position that you see, just so that you can manage it pretty well in case we do get a little bit of a pullback. But INSEE, this was a name that I was in a couple weeks ago, caught this thing for a beautiful swing trade, and I kind of said that's enough. I took my profits. It got right to the filled the gap right up to here. You can see all back here. You can see that it filled this gap, but it sat back here a little bit into support, and there was a it actually was a call spread. There was some calls that went up first. Sometimes they don't put these things up exactly at the same time. But this was the order that caught my attention, the February 82.5 calls. And then there was also 3 minutes later, there was the 85 calls that looked like they were sold. So 82.5, 85, which I think is perfect. That's what I'm targeting, is basically this 86. I bought stock, right? Because again, if you look at this name, it's got a high implied volatility. I don't want to really own front month calls at this point, or I should say, I don't want to own February calls with this. I would rather own this stock and trade the stock versus support, and see if it can get up to that 67, excuse me, 80, 86 VPOC. All right, so that's a couple names. Again, I think some really gave the LVS really interesting. They bought every semiconductor in the first hour of the day. Taiwan Semi, Applied Materials, AMD, NVIDIA. They really went nuts after MRVL was another one too. All chasing, all this stuff chasing. But I think some good interest there, and some other names just to kind of give you an idea. All right, guys, thanks for watching the video. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.